All right. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Good, good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me here.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you with us. So, we're going to be talking about poetry today. And the book that we're going to be talking about is called Poetry Showcase Volume 9. There it is. And so, this is a collection of various authors, though, right? Not just your work.
hmm Yeah, no, this is actually none of my work. I don't get to be in this one because I'm the editor, but it's 50 other authors, and it's the best. I think we had about 300 submissions, so it's the best of the HWA, the Horror Writers Association.
Oh, I see. Okay. So,
hmm
your editor is your
Yeah,
credit for this one.
yeah,
Okay.
I have been in it in the past, but this year I just get to be the editor. I can't put myself in.
Okay. Did you publish the book as well?
Um, Technically, yes. Well, no, technically it's the HWA that published it, but I was responsible for putting it together.
Okay. So all of the poetry that's included in that book is horror poetry?
Yes, it is dark poetry or horror poetry, and there's a fine line between the two.
All right. Where would you
So
put Edgar Allan Poe? And then we can go from there.
I would say Edgar Allan Poe is dark because horror, I think, and it's all, there's going to be a million opinions on this. So I'm not saying this is the right opinion or the all-encompassing opinion. But in my book, horror is like it's meant to elicit fear, so your heart is pounding, and dark poetry is meant to elicit more of a feeling of dread. So not so much terror, I'm not scared, but it's spooky and I might like that. Where horror I don't like it. I'm afraid, that kind of thing. That's my distinction.
So fear versus depression.
Well, I wouldn't say depression, but just an appreciation of the darkness, like that whole gothic I mean, it's almost like a pleasurable thing to think of like dark castles and spooky places and that more somber think Wednesday Addams. Everybody's in love with Wednesday Addams right now. Like that would be more of the dark poetry, I think, and horror would actually be when there's blood flying.
So I
And
saw
again,
some,
my opinion.
well, that's all right. I saw something on your bio that I wanted to bring up that is something new for me. It says you're a third generation Shimachu-American.
hmm
Okay, what
Yep,
is,
Shimanchu is basically Okinawan, but it is an indigenous people of Okinawa. But it's a political thing to specify Shimanchu instead of Okinawa because Okinawa is being occupied by Japan illegally, and so there's a lot of things like that we don't have to get to on the Douglas Coleman show. But that's why I specify Shimanchu specifically.
okay, are the Okinawan people akin to the Australian Aborigines? Is that how they feel about the Japanese, or they don't consider themselves Japanese?
They are not Japanese because it's actually a different language. It's similar, but it's the same. Like they can understand each other, but only a little bit. I mean, but the Okinawan language or Shimanchu is actually on the endangered species or endangered languages list for UNESCO. So it almost doesn't exist anymore. There's a danger that it's just going to vanish. There's no written language because it was a language of the spirit from person to person. So it's not Japanese. Um, and the customs were different, the foods were different, so that's kind of where that disparity comes in. Is the United Nations says Shimanchu is a different people, but Japan doesn't recognize it as a different people because if they did, then we have to kick the military bases off, and politics, politics, politics.
Okay. I just never heard that before, so I thought that was
Mhm.
interesting. In fact, I went on your
Yeah.
website and you have a whole section on it, so I thought that was good. You know.
Yeah, well, and thank you for asking because I feel a little foolish for putting it on there because I am third generation. So it's not like I speak any of the language or anything. So I have cultural elements, but I don't want to look like I'm appropriating that culture. But every time I can get somebody to ask me what it is, then I feel like that's the win, so that they know it's not Okinawa, or Okinawan is not Japanese. It's not even Okinawan. That's the name that Japan gave to the islands. It was the Ryukyu Kingdom. And they still have a princess and royalty right there, ready to go anytime. So I appreciate you asking me because that's literally why I keep it up there.
Okay, well, very interesting. So let's talk just a little bit about you, and then maybe you can read something of your work.
Absolutely.
Um, have you been a writer your entire life? Is that what you aspired to do from a young age?
Yes, I think I was well, I learned to read really early, and that's how I didn't have a lot of friends, so I kind of filtered everything through writing and reading. And then sometime in maybe second grade, I read a comic book, and I think it had Grant Morrison was one of the writers, but the villain was the writer. And he makes this whole statement about how, like, you can write the future, you can write anything. And he literally dies from writer's block because he's writing everything and it happens. And then he can't think of the next thing, and like something is coming to eat him, and he dies. And that impressed me so much. I was like, wow, writing, I can do anything with writing, as the second grader. So I went and wrote my first story, which was horrible. It was like so dark. I don't know where it came from. I apologize, everybody. The teachers wanted to counsel me. I probably read way too much Alfred Hitchcock at the time. But yeah, and so that just kind of started from there. I knew from the get go in second grade, I wanted to be a writer and a mother. And I did both things. So I kind of consider like everything from here is just gravy. It's just a win.
Actually, on your talking points, it says, "Why do we like scary things and being afraid?" And what does that say about our society and the world? So give us that, because that's sort of a continuation of what you just started to talk about.
Um, I actually don't remember what I replied, so I'm just going to make it up again. So hopefully, I'm saying something very similar as to what I told you the first time and not making myself a liar. But isn't that what writers are? We are professional liars. So I'll go with that as a defense. Why do we like horror and what does it do for our society? I think it's horror reminds us that we're alive and that there are things out there, but we can defeat them. I kind of think of writing horror and reading horror as role play. We face our monsters and our darkest fears, and we learn to defeat them, or we come to accept that they may not be defeatable. But definitely running from them and not recognizing them is never going to win. You don't stay in the haunted house and live to the end and be the final girl or guy by pretending the monster's not there. It's going to get you. So I think that's kind of what horror does. And the more that we're interested in it, like right now, horror has a big resurgence. I think that's because we are living through some pretty damn dark times. And I apologize if I shouldn't have said that. But we're living through some dark times. And I think that our interest in horror is us recognizing that we need to role play this out a little bit and kind of face some of this fear because it's not going to go away. We have to do something or come to grips with it.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, if you watch any day of news, part of the
Hmm.
news cycle, there's always something horrific, but it doesn't make me feel
Yeah.
the same way as going to see a horror film.
No, and that's why I think horror is so important. It's because it gives it to us in ways we can handle. I honestly don't read the news that much. I brush the headlines so I know what's going on, but most of it is too horrible for me. But I read horror because I can manage that. I know this is pretend, and so I get the same feeling of, I can defeat this, or I got scared a little bit, but it's in a way I can manage, and then I can just kind of feel better, I guess, like release that. We can't keep it inside and not find some kind of release for it without worse things happening.
Do you strictly write poetry or do you write novels as well?
No, no, I actually just finished my first novel. I'm in the editing stages of it, but I actually started out writing nonfiction. So I did nonfiction for years, and it was only a bet and an argument that got me to write fiction. And that was somebody very loudly at a writers' conference saying that nonfiction writers couldn't write fiction because we don't have the imagination. And I was upset. And I am like the nicest person in the world. I swear. I never have arguments. But after probably 5 minutes of this discussion, both of us, like glaring, yelling at each other, the veins pulsating in our heads. And they told us they were going to kick us out if we couldn't control ourselves. And so that night, though, I went home and I was like, I'll show you. I do have an imagination, rah, 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 rah. And I wrote my first book, which was end of May. And I kind of figured, there you go, I proved it. And it did pretty good for a first book, especially. Like I didn't appreciate it at the time, um, how good it did do. And then I just kind of got stuck in that. Not stuck, that's like a really bad way to put it, but I just kept going with that, like trying to figure out the whole, because fiction is different, the whole puzzle of fiction. And then I started writing poetry, or actually just coming out of the closet with my poetry. And it just kind of went from there. But yeah, I do actually write nonfiction a lot. That's actually why I'm moving to Brazil. I'm doing a research trip on shamanism there, like how the Yuda, which are the Okinawan witches, I guess, would be like a way to say it, but they're in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
So I'll be going back to nonfiction
Oh, that's interesting.
temporarily.
So I was
Yeah,
just going to
I
ask
write
you.
everything.
I was just going to ask you the type of nonfiction that you're writing. So it's documentary type.
It is now. I was just doing newspapers before, newspaper writing, which is documentary in a way. And now I've kind of gotten into a little bit of memoir, but not that much. So this is going to be straight research oriented. And then there's another one I'm writing on the side about basically immigrating backwards, to do with me working on this. And that will be memoir because my grandmother immigrated here, my great grandmother. And now I'm kind of like throwing away her sacrifice in a way and immigrating out, So that's been like a curious thing of how does she feel about that? And, things like that.
Is she still alive?
No. I say, how does she feel about that? Because I think when you're part Asian, they're always here. All your spirits and relatives are always here in the ancestors. So
Okay.
that's probably why I refer to her as present tense. So,
Well, times change and people move, and it's not.
yeah.
When she came to the United States, it was a very different world than it is now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's what I'm exploring is kind of like her thoughts. Like, would she have been happy with this? Would she agree with this choice? Did she regret hers? Because the Brazilian immigrants from Shimanchu and the American immigrants fared very differently. In America, a lot of the culture was pushed down, like be like everybody else. But in Brazil, it was more like be yourself, celebrate your own culture. So the way that the two lines have, I guess, evolved is vastly different.
Okay. We've got just about a minute and a half left. Do you have a short one of your poems that you want to read?
I do. I'll read out of Tortured Willows, which is kind of where I got into the Shimanchu mission, I guess I could say, so much because it was four of us were getting together. It was Lee Murray, Christina Singh, and myself, and Genevieve Flynn. And we were going to write about our Asian experience, whatever that meant, like blended or, immigration or however. And so in writing that, I wound up kind of breaking apart my special plan of being super tame with my life. And then now I'm going to Brazil. But I'll read one called the Kekubi. This is based on a true story of something that I saw when I was 13 at a house in Tennessee. And an Kekubi is a type of ghost that the head comes off, and it's like a vampiric kind of headless ghost, but only the head you have to worry about. So, the Kekubi. I thought she was there just for me, my own terror, a resident ghost. It made sense to me. The house was Victorian in the deep, deep South. Such places have ghosts. She hung behind me mid-air, her face contorted, her hair streaming down, plastered to her streaking face. Silent, hateful screams. Like slick tentacles, her neck cords trailed to the ground, disembodied face, soaked wet from drowning, or perhaps from her own tears. She couldn't tell me. My Nikekubi, out of place in Tennessee, out of place like me.
Oh, short and sweet. All right.
Very short and sweet. That's the way I like it.
Well, super. Well, on that note, we're going to have to wind this down. Angela, thank you so much for coming on this show. Do you have
thank you so much.
Do you have a website you want to give out?
I do. It's just AngelaYSmith.com, and pretty much all the socials and everything I'm doing are linked there.
Okay, great. Well, best of luck on your move to Brazil. How long are you going to be down there?
Thank you. Indefinitely, actually. So we've rented a house for a year, and then we're just going to take it from there. But it's pretty much as long as the research is good and I have things to learn, we will be staying there.
Can you speak Portuguese?
Not well, I will say like about 4 words. But I find when I get to a country, because I did this with Montreal and I did this with Australia, after I get there and get immersed in it, not that the Australians speak a different language-ish than us,
Yeah, ish.
but after I get there, I will figure it out. Like being there and being immersed in it, I pick it up.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show and best of
Yeah,
luck.
thank you.